My husband has lost his memory. Before losing it, he was handsome but aloof and indifferent. After losing it, he is polite, gentle, and considerate. I said to him, I am your wife, and you love me very much. The first half is true, but the second half is a lie. Ding! RoyalStory reminds you to click the subscribe button in the bottom right corner to read the complete novel. Shin Junran woke up when it was already night. The stars were dim, and the bright moon hung high. I was originally holding a handkerchief to wipe Shin Junran's face. Suddenly, I saw his long eyelashes flutter, and he slowly opened his eyes. His cheeks were somewhat pale, and his expression was dazed, showing a hint of fragility under the dim light. I instinctively lowered my voice. You're awake. How do you feel? Shin Junran looked at me quietly. After a while, he parted his lips and asked hoarsely, Who are you? Shin Junran has lost his memory. The doctor said it was due to a bruise in his brain, and it's uncertain whether he will recover. I sent a maid to escort the doctor and sat back down by the bed. Shin Junran's brows were slightly furrowed, probably uncomfortable. So, I gently massaged his brow, smoothing out the wrinkles. Do you not remember anything at all? Not even a little? Shin Junran said, Not exactly, there are some vague fragments, but I can't recall them clearly. It's okay, I'll tell you. I said to him, Your name is Shin Junran, you are 28 years old, and you are the prime minister of this dynasty. Yesterday, while you were out, you encountered an assassin, and during the fight, you accidentally hurt your head and have only just woken up. I tucked a few strands of hair behind his ear, and without hesitation, I continued. This is our home, I am your wife, we have been married for 2 years, and you love me very much. The amnesiac Shin Junran listened obediently, and when I finished, he called me Madam. I couldn't help but smile. You don't have to call me that. My name is Fu Linshan, and you always call me Linshan. Shin Junran complied, All right, Linshan. Perhaps it was because I was the first person Shin Junran saw upon waking, he trusted me completely. He believed everything I said. But in truth, I was deceiving him. We are indeed husband and wife, but the one he loves is not me. Shin Junran's heart should belong to the childhood friend, Princess Xiao. She is beautiful and intelligent, with a talent for painting. They have studied and played together since childhood. Almost everyone assumes they will marry in the future. I have seen Shin Junran with Princess Xiao. Around July or August, they picked apricots under an apricot tree. The tree wasn't too tall, but all the low-hanging fruit had been picked by others, leaving only the higher ones. Princess Xiao stretched her arm and tiptoed but still couldn't reach. She wasn't angry, she just pouted and looked at Shin Junran for help. Shin Junran is a person who usually keeps his thoughts to himself and rarely smiles. We have been married for over 2 years, and he has always treated me with courtesy but has not been close. However, that day, Princess Xiao didn't say anything but simply gazed at him longingly. He indulgently raised his hand to lower the branch of the apricot tree. Princess Xiao picked an apricot and happily squinted her eyes. The sunset cast a slanting light, painting the sky in red. The light filtered through the apricot tree leaves, as if outlining their figures with a fluffy golden edge. They really did seem well-matched. But what good is being well-matched? Shin Junran still married me. After losing his memory, Shin Junran became much gentler. He stuck to me all day, wanting to hear about our past. This was indeed a bit challenging. What stories could I possibly tell about our past? If we talk about childhood friends and mutual affection, that would be him and Princess Xiao. If we talk about post-marriage love and intimacy, that also has nothing to do with us. What could I possibly share with him? Looking at the somewhat innocent, curious eyes before me, my heart suddenly trembled. He now remembers nothing, whatever I say will become his new memory. It's like a blank sheet of paper, whatever I draw will define what it becomes. Thinking of this, I subtly shifted my gaze away. Then let me tell you about when we first met. You fell in love with me at first sight. I fabricated a beautiful first encounter for Shin Junran. I told him I originally lived in S City, and 6 years ago, my father was promoted, so my whole family moved to the capital. I also told him that on the day I arrived in the capital, I ran into him on Y Street, and he was captivated by me at first sight. To be fair, this lie isn't very clever. How could someone like Shinjunran fall in love at first sight with anyone? Moreover, who in the capital doesn't know that Shinjunran loves Princess Xiao? With just a little inquiry, this lie could be easily exposed. But Shinjunran believed me. He listened intently and asked, "What happened next?" I continued to weave my tale. "Later, you often met me, bringing me delicious and fun things. I understand, this is to win my favor. That's how one should act when they like someone. You even brought me lotus pods, do you remember?" This part was true. After all, a sophisticated lie needs a mix of truth. Shinjunran thought hard. "I don't quite remember." "Sorry." "It's all right, I acted very understanding, I remember it well enough." I initially wanted to concoct more interesting and memorable stories. However, my ability fell short, and at this point, it was becoming difficult to continue. So, I had to hastily skip over and wrap it up. "In short, you treated me very well and are also an outstanding person, so I fell for you too. Not long after, you came to propose to my family. If at first, I was a bit nervous and self-loathing. At this moment, I had already achieved a sort of spiritual elevation. What does it matter if it's the truth? What does it matter if it's a lie? We are a couple, and everything I do is just to make our relationship better. Look, aren't we both very happy now?" I looked into Shinjunran's bright eyes and told myself that I was not wrong. After my rambling, Shinjunran completely believed that we used to be a pair of loving lovers who were very close and harmonious. We spent a wonderful time together. It was summer, with golden plums and ripe apricots. We went to the apricot grove in the countryside, picking and eating, and ended up filling a whole basket with red apricots. On our way back, Shinjunran carried the basket in one hand and held my hand with the other. The beautiful sunset shone on us as well. In the Mandarin Duck Lake, the green lotus leaned against each other, and the lotus flowers sent out their fragrance. Shinjunran and I rented a wooden boat, rowed by a boatman to the center of the lake. After some playful antics, Shinjunran leaned over the bow, picked a lotus pod, and peeled the lotus seeds for me. He carefully peeled off the green skin and removed the lotus heart with delicate and patient movements. I happily ate the lotus seeds, completely unaware of the scorching sun shining on my face. Until Shinjunran covered my head with a large lotus leaf. He gently patted my head. "The sun is too harsh right now, be careful not to get sunburned." On the way back, Shinjunran carried a cloth bag filled with tender lotus seeds, while I held a bunch of pink lotus flowers, leaving a trail of fragrance. At night, we would also have some fun. Shinjunran would untie my clothing. Seeing me obediently allowing him to play, he paused for a moment. "Did we have anything before?" I felt a bit shy, but still replied. "Are you talking about intimacy?" "Of course we did. Have you forgotten? We've been married for 2 years. You shouldn't ask if we had it. You should ask how many times we did. Then I could tell you many, many, many times." The Shinjunran before his amnesia seemed pure and indifferent, but in bed, he was never vague and always wanted to be thorough before stopping. This often left me confused, unable to tell whether he cared for me or not. Probably, there wasn't a couple in the whole capital like us. Strangers by day, intimate by night. These things really happened, there was no need to deceive him, so I spoke the truth. I emphasized that he was too rough, too careless. Shinjunran felt a bit guilty, but not much. He said slowly, "Then I'll be gentler this time." I didn't know what he meant by gentler, in any case, I didn't feel it. Even after losing his memory, Shinjunran was still strong-willed at heart. As he held my waist while moving, he added requests. "Lin Shan, open your eyes and look at me." I looked at him, but he still wasn't satisfied. Unreasonably asking, was I better before, or am I better now? I really didn't know what the point of such a question was, wasn't it just him messing around? His clumsy skills led to poor experiences in bed, yet he still had the face to ask about good or bad. I scratched at his chest. He looked down at the faint scratches and chuckled. Like a little cat's paw. The moon was high, and the candlelight flickered. Shinjunran wiped away my tears and brushed aside my damp hair. He looked at me tenderly, with a glimmer in his eyes. Lin Shan, I must have really liked you before. I stared at him in a daze. Of course, I hoped he loved me, but I also understood that this was just an illusion created by his current emotional fullness. Perhaps, he had mistakenly placed his feelings for Princess Qiao onto me. I felt my eyes water again, but I didn't know why I was crying. I wove a net of lies, trapping him within it, and also trapping myself. I had all of Shin Junran. Not just the embraces at night, but also the affections during the day. We had done childish things together, and selflessly shared each other's joys and sorrows. I knew the lies would eventually be exposed, I just didn't expect it to happen so soon. A month after his amnesia, subordinates and colleagues began to visit our residence in succession. It seemed that official matters had reached a limit and could no longer be delayed. They dragged Shin Junran into the study and stayed for quite a while. When they left, I went into the study to find Shin Junran. I expected to see a little poor thing who was flustered and helpless. To my surprise, he was sitting steadily at the table, reading a document. I craned my neck to take a look. It was obscure and difficult to understand. I asked him, "Can you still handle these matters?" He replied with a easier than I thought. He sounded quite pleased with himself. I couldn't help but laugh and stepped out of the study, no longer wanting to disturb him. Once he started, Shin Junran slowly picked up the official matters again. He began attending court, discussing state affairs with the emperor and ministers. It seemed that his amnesia didn't affect his judgment regarding matters. I didn't know whether this was a good thing or a bad thing. Shin Junran handling official matters looked too much like the one before his amnesia. Calm and collected, yet distant. I couldn't help but wonder if he had already regained his memory. But once he stepped out of the study, he would turn back into that easygoing, playful Shin Junran again. On this day, there was no court meeting, so Shin Junran went to a certain official's house at the inspectorate to discuss matters. He told me that he would be back in no more than 2 hours. Yet, nearly 3 hours passed, and he still hadn't returned. I was worried and hurriedly took a maid to look for him. Before I reached halfway, I saw Shin Junran. He was talking to Princess Qiao in a pavilion by the roadside. It was too far away for me to hear what they were saying. However, I could tell they were enjoying their conversation. My head buzzed, and I was really afraid she might say something inappropriate to Shin Junran. I hurriedly shouted, "Honey." I ran over to Shin Junran, and their conversation had already ended. Princess Qiao looked at me with a meaningful expression and teased. "Look, you've hardly said a few words, and your wife is already out looking for you. Shin, you're really lucky." Shin Junran smiled, said goodbye to her, and took my hand to leave. On the way back to the residence, I observed Shin Junran. He looked as usual, and there was nothing wrong. I bit my lip and tentatively asked, "What were you talking about just now? You looked so happy." "Ah, it was nothing much. I just heard Princess Qiao mention that we were childhood friends." It was quite surprising. "So, what do you think of the princess?" This time, Shin Junran thought for a moment. "Do you want the truth?" Sweet on the outside, sharp on the inside. What are you saying? How does that relate to Princess Qiao? I pursed my lips and looked up at him. "You're supposed to talk about Princess Qiao, not me." Shin Junran, "Of course I'm talking about her." "What about you?" I blinked, feeling guilty. "Of course not, I just said that casually. In fact, my true thought was, it's about the same. After all, I'm not exactly a good person." Shin Junran's meeting with Princess Qiao made me anxious. What troubled me even more was that Shin Junran's memory was really starting to come back. He said he remembered giving me lotus pods before. "I'm not very clear, just remember that it was raining that day, and I gave you the umbrella and the lotus pods, right?" I looked at him with a complex expression. After a long while, I said, "Yes." "Did you remember anything else?" Also, I think I was in a cell, and you came to see me, crying like a little kitten." I replied nonchalantly, "That was before we got married." "You were wronged and suffered an unjust imprisonment." Shin Junran hesitated to speak. Not sure what he was thinking, I softly comforted him, "You've been cleared of your name, don't worry." "No," Shin Junran shook his head, "I meant to say, You looked really pretty when you cried that day. Can you cry again for me to see? I smiled slightly and kicked him. On the Ghost Festival, we honored our ancestors, burned paper clothes, and released river lanterns. Shinjunran went to buy river lanterns while I waited by the calm river. The riverside was crowded with people, and one lotus lantern after another was released into the water, lighting up the entire riverbank. Fu Linshan. Someone stood beside me and called my name. I instantly recognized that nightmarish voice. I stood and greeted, Your Highness. Princess Qiao said, Why are you alone? Where's Shinjunran? I pointed to the nearby gathering of vendors. He went to buy river lanterns, he'll be back soon. She nodded, still smiling. Ever since you two got married, I haven't seen him much. A few days ago, I finally ran into him, but you took him away before we could say much. It's such a pity, I still have things to say to him. I could hear the hidden malice in her words. So I boldly said, If you have something to say, why not just say it directly? All right. The princess raised her lips, smiling wickedly. I heard that Shinjunran fell in love with you at first sight. I moved my lips but couldn't find my voice. This was really hitting the nail on the head. If I embarrassed myself in front of others, I wouldn't care. But why did it have to happen in front of her? How infuriating. I knew I wouldn't win against her in this conversation, so I simply fell silent. I'm also curious. If he has someone he likes, would he really fall for someone else at first sight? She scoffed, her eyes filled with disdain. I never expected someone as cunning as you would actually marry Shinjunran and become a phoenix. What do you think would happen if I told him the person he likes is me? Shinjunran probably wouldn't be able to stand being deceived, right? At this point, the princess suddenly showed a sincere smile, looking over my shoulder. Shen? I turned around abruptly to see Shinjunran holding 2 river lanterns, looking at me with a complex expression. My head felt like it was struck, and I nearly fell over. You. I clenched my fists, unable to continue. What more was there to ask? Just by looking at his expression, I could tell he had heard everything. Probably to save my face, Shinjunran didn't say anything. He calmly placed the lanterns down for me and then took me to a secluded spot by a bridge. He pressed me against the bridge pillar, and before I could say anything, I felt darkness in front of my eyes. Shinjunran held my head and leaned down to kiss my lips. I was caught completely off guard. Moments later, as a passerby approached, Shinjunran finally released me, who was left dazed. He moved his hand to my shoulder and squeezed it. You were startled, relax. I came back to my senses, my pale face gradually regaining color. Still feeling flustered, I quickly said the most advantageous thing for myself. You married me willingly. And what else? Lin Shan, is what the princess said true? Tell me the truth. His tone wasn't harsh, it even carried a comforting undertone. I felt a pang in my nose. Do you still believe what I say? Shinjunran looked at me seriously. Of course. We are husband and wife, if you say it, I will believe you. The first time I met Shinjunran, it was a stormy day. I was once again scolded by my mother, who pointed at my nose. Get out! In no time, I found myself locked outside the gate. I knocked on the door, pleading desperately. I know I was wrong, Mother, I truly know I was wrong. Please let me in, I beg you, Mother. Even as I said this, I didn't really understand what I had done wrong. I had been eating quietly, without causing any trouble. But suddenly, Mother got very angry, throwing down her chopsticks and saying I was disrespectful. After thinking it over, the only reason I could come up with was that I had stepped in with my left foot first. I knew I couldn't knock that door open, because I had never been able to before. But that day the weather was so bad, I thought Mother might feel sorry for me. Mother's heart was made of stone. In the end, she didn't pity me at all. At that time, our family had just moved from S City to the capital. Mother knew I was unfamiliar with the capital and had no friends to turn to, yet she still locked me out. Since that was the case, I couldn't be blamed for being ruthless. I sat on the stone steps outside, resting my chin on my hand, expressionless, thinking that next, I would get a mild illness. So that Father would understand that Mother's usual gentleness and grace were all a facade. The truth was, she was a kind-hearted person who was as fierce as a hungry tiger pouncing on its prey. My plan ultimately didn't come to fruition. Shinjunran passed by and saw me looking like a drenched little puppy. He didn't ask me why I was sitting there or what had happened. He simply handed me his umbrella and stuffed 2 lotus pods from his arms into my hands. Just picked. The lotus seeds are sweet and can relieve bitterness, he said. I stared at him in a daze. Shinjunran was extraordinarily handsome, with starry eyes and a jade-like face, a graceful figure. Though his expression was somewhat cold, there was a sense of distance that seemed to say not to approach him even if one knew him. I understood that there were kind-hearted people with harsh appearances, just as there were cold-faced people with warm hearts. Mother was the former, while Shinjunran was the latter. I had intended to ask Shinjunran for his name, so I could thank him one day. But Shinjunran said, it was just a small favor, no need to thank me. Later, I learned that he was a well-known talented scholar in the capital, Shinjunran. I also learned that his beloved was Princess Xiao. I knew I was far from him, so I didn't dare to disturb him. At most, I could only gaze at him from afar. Like everyone else in the capital, I thought he and the princess would get married. I even imagined how grand their wedding would be and how many heartfelt blessings they would receive. I never expected that an accident would occur. For years ago, Shinjunran was not yet the prime minister. He was framed and embroiled in a murder case, thrown into the prison of the Ministry of Justice. Life and death were serious matters, not to be taken lightly. At that time, many people said that heaven was jealous of talented individuals, and Shinjunran would likely perish in that case. I didn't believe it. I didn't believe Shinjunran was a bad person, nor did I believe he would die. Naively, I expected Princess Xiao to rush to help Shinjunran and rescue him. After all, they were so close, weren't they? But one day in a tavern, I heard Princess Xiao say to someone else, if I had known he was such a ruthless person, indiscriminately killing the innocent, I wouldn't have gotten close to him. In that moment, I felt as if I had been struck by lightning. I didn't understand. Everyone said their feelings were deep. But when Shinjunran needed her, she not only didn't help him but also added insult to injury. I wanted to rescue Shinjunran, but I didn't have the ability. Although my father had been promoted to the capital, he only held a nominal position. It sounded good to call him Lord, but he had no real power. I was even less than that, nothing at all. I tried every possible way, sending out a lot of silver, building connections, and finally managed to see Shinjunran one night. I brought him roasted meat and snow pear soup, thinking to give him something warm to eat. Shinjunran didn't touch his chopsticks. He sat on a pile of weeds, his back straight, and asked in a hoarse voice, "What are you here for?" His whole body was covered in whip marks, clearly having been tortured. Yet when he spoke, his tone was still indifferent, as if he didn't welcome me. Tears streamed down my face. "You're too weak to even speak. Why are you still being so fierce?" Shinjunran fell silent for a moment and explained, "I'm not being fierce to you." I insisted, "You are. I can feel it." He stopped talking. Shinjunran was always like this. When he had a cold expression, he kept it. At that time, we had known each other for more than a year, and whenever we met, he would say a couple of sentences and then stop. The atmosphere became tense. I took the initiative to ease the situation, pushing the bowl and chopsticks toward him. "Please eat a little, otherwise, I feel uncomfortable just watching." "Okay, thank you." I watched him eat, and when his lips were less dry, I cautiously asked, "Shinjunran, will you die?" "Maybe, maybe not." "Really?" "I thought you would have a way to save yourself. In the stories, that's how it always goes." "I'm sorry, I don't have that kind of ability." "I'm sorry to disappoint you." Before I left, I told him I gave the jailers some silver to treat you better. Shinjunran frowned, "You don't have to go to such lengths for me." I felt a wave of frustration. My good intentions were met with disdain. Even though I never expected gratitude, I still felt wronged. "Anyway, I've already done it, so don't worry about me." "I didn't spend your silver. I didn't mean it that way." "Forget it, you should go. Don't come again." He said it so coldly, and as a girl, no matter how thick-skinned I was, I couldn't stay any longer. I stood up, agreeing. Okay. Later, when the murder case was resolved, Shin Junran was naturally released. The emperor, knowing he had suffered unjustly, rewarded him with many gifts. Gold, silver, treasures, and precious stones. It was like striking it rich. After resting for a few days, Shin Junran came to thank me. I was astonished to see the courtyard filled with gift boxes, stammering, You didn't have to do this. It's necessary. I was in prison for 36 days, and you were the only one who came to see me. I'm very grateful to you. Shin Junran quietly apologized. That day, I had a bad tone. I'm sorry, please don't be angry. I'm not angry. As I said this, I glanced at Mother's courtyard and gathered my courage. If you really appreciate me, then, can you marry me? I've reached the age to marry, and Mother wants me to become someone's concubine. I don't want that. Although I called her mother, in fact, she was just my stepmother. She was my father's new wife, and she wasn't good to me at all. I couldn't bring myself to call her mother. But if I didn't, she would definitely go to my father, crying and complaining. In that case, my father would scold me or even hit me. I would be the one suffering. Shin Junran was actually hesitating. I understood what he was hesitating about. He liked Princess Qiao, but during his difficult times, Princess Qiao's actions had truly disappointed him. I thought it was a bit unfair, so I discussed it with him. How about this? I can be your concubine. At least I know you are upright and won't make things difficult for me. Shin Junran made a decision. He curled his finger and gently tapped my chin. How can you be a concubine? At the very least, we should have a proper marriage. Just like that, I married Shin Junran. Although we were husband and wife, our married life was rather dull. He originally only worked at the censorate, but after 2 years of marriage, he unexpectedly rose through the ranks all the way to Prime Minister. The greater the power, the greater the responsibility. He was busy with official duties and didn't particularly like me. I could only abide by my role and do what a wife should do. To be honest, Shin Junran had given me a lot: status, position, care, and affection. But I was never satisfied. I still wanted love. So, the moment I learned he had lost his memory, I made a wrong decision. I said to him, You love me very much. Shin Junran was silent for a long time. The surroundings were quiet, but the distant opera stage was lively. I had told such a big lie that I didn't even dare to look at him, only lowering my head to count the patterns on my shoes. I'm sorry, but I don't want a divorce. Shin Junran replied, I never said I wanted a divorce. I choked a bit. If you want to leave me, it's better not to. At this moment, I was still being stubborn. I'm very sorry, I lied to you, but if I had the chance to do it again, I would still do the same. Who you like doesn't matter to me, I only know. I raised my head, looking into Shin Junran's eyes, word by word. If love is not destined, then I will fight for it myself. Perhaps I was too brazen, and Shin Junran laughed in anger. He helplessly poked my forehead, shook his head, and walked away. I got up to chase after him, but he deliberately quickened his pace. I had no choice but to jog to keep up with him. After returning home, Shin Junran went to the study, leaving behind a sentence, I will settle the score with you later. I didn't know how long later would be or how he would settle the score with me. All I knew was that after the Ghost Festival, Shin Junran suddenly became busy. I had the maid go out to inquire and found out that the person who had previously tried to assassinate him had been caught. Speaking of those assassins, I had to mention last year's major examination corruption case. Last year, during the imperial examination, there was a student named Gu Xindao who was exceptionally talented and ranked first in both the Shuxi and Juren categories. He came from Z City to the capital for the exam, initially filled with confidence, but ended up failing. At that time, powerful families had a strong hold in the capital, often engaging in the corrupt practice of buying and selling official positions during the examinations. Gu Xindao, aware of the unfairness, joined forces with other capable candidates to submit a petition against the examiners. His Majesty entrusted this case to Shin Junran. To thoroughly investigate the case, Shin Junran offended nearly all the families involved in the corruption. After the corruption case, Shin Junran rose to become prime minister, second only to the emperor. Those powerful families couldn't swallow this humiliation, so they bribed some underworld figures to ambush and assassinate him. In order to deal with those assassins, Shin Junran was busy for another half-month. After the case was closed, before he could catch his breath, news came that Princess Zhao was engaged. I originally didn't know about this. It was Mr. Zhao, the censor, who came to the estate to discuss official matters with Shin Junran, and I overheard their conversation. As the weather turned cool, they brewed tea in the courtyard, drinking and talking. After discussing official business, Mr. Zhao didn't leave. He glanced at Shin Junran and teased, "I heard Princess Zhao is engaged. What are your thoughts?" Shin Junran didn't even look up. The princess's engagement has nothing to do with me. Seeing his indifferent expression, Mr. Zhao slapped his forehead. Look at me, I forgot you're suffering from amnesia. You probably can't even remember what Princess Zhao looks like, right? How could that be? Shin Junran poured him more tea, his gestures calm and noble. I remember. Mr. Zhao was shocked. When did that happen? 5 or 6 days ago, not long ago. I stood a few steps away, holding snacks, clearly hearing their conversation. I wasn't eavesdropping on purpose, no, I was doing it on purpose. I originally planned to bring them some snacks, but when I heard them discussing Princess Zhao, I stopped. I just wanted to hear Shin Junran's thoughts on the princess's engagement. I didn't expect he had already regained his memory. I weighed my options and ultimately decided not to approach and went back the way I came. No wonder in the past few days, even though he was busy with the assassins, he still didn't have time to see me. He was deliberately avoiding me. Because he remembered that he didn't like me anymore. Half an hour later, Shin Junran returned to the room. I sat at the table, putting on a fierce expression, but my eyes betrayed me and turned red. Shin Junran was at a loss. What's wrong? I haven't even said anything, and you're about to cry again. He reached out to wipe my tears away gently, his demeanor affectionate. I couldn't see it at all. Just a moment ago, he was cold and distant, like ice. I stared at him and said angrily, I heard everything. Why didn't you tell me when you regained your memory? Because I lied to you. Do you want to deceive me like this? Watching me live in fear every day, aren't you pleased? Shin Junran paused his movements. Then he held my chin, examining my face from side to side. He chuckled lightly, what a villain who complains first. Fu Linshan, you're so petty. What? What did he just say? I'm petty? Okay, maybe I am a little. But how could I let him insult me? Especially since I was already angry. I shot back, Shin Junran, you bad guy. Shin Junran replied, yes, I am a bad guy. I was momentarily speechless. Since he admitted it, if I kept bringing it up, it would really prove I was petty. Shin Junran had such a low-class way of arguing. I awkwardly said, well, not that bad. Shin Junran pinched my ear. Linshan, I'm sorry I kept this from you. But if you hadn't heard it, I would have continued to hide it. Wait, this unrepentant attitude, this strong demeanor. It was just like when I had caught him in a lie before. Shin Junran had said he would settle the score with me. Is this how he settles scores? How could there be such a boomerang effect in this world? I was about to jump up in anger when I heard Shin Junran gently say, I thought you would prefer the amnesiac Shin Junran. I quickly denied it. No, I like Shin Junran, so I would like him in any form. Although, the amnesiac Shin Junran was indeed easier to get along with. I spoke sincerely, but Shin Junran didn't believe me. He softly said, you're lying again, aren't you? I saw the divorce papers you left in the study. Before I lost my memory, did you want to divorce me? I had indeed written them. I had written many, in fact. Because after we got married, sometimes I couldn't stand Shin Junran's personality. Whenever I felt stifled, I would angrily take up my pen and write a divorce letter. However, I had never intended to give those letters to him. I just wrote them to vent. I never wanted to really separate from him. After writing, once I had vented my feelings, I would tear them up. The divorce letter he saw was probably one I forgot to tear up that day. Shin Junran realized the situation and said, "Oh. So you do like the memory restored Shin Junran, right?" "Yes," I asked, "and what about you?" "What about me?" "You like Princess Chiao." "I never liked her." "You're lying, everyone says that, and I've seen it." "You picked apricots for her and smiled happily." Shin Junran replied mysteriously, "Is that it? Just picking apricots?" "Then what about how I hug and kiss and sleep with you?" I was at a loss for words. How could he keep bringing up sleeping together? "And when did this happen?" "I don't remember." I quickly replied, "It was the year I came to the capital. The apricots were high up, and you pulled down the branches so she could reach them." Rarely, I saw a look of silence on Shin Junran's face. This emotion made me doubt whether I was really just being unreasonable. Perhaps I wasn't that happy, maybe it was just your imagination. Shin Junran spoke gently, or perhaps I was indeed in a good mood that day, which made me seem happy. "But I can assure you, I have no romantic feelings for Princess Chiao. If I were picking apricots for someone I liked, I would pick them directly. I wouldn't just pull down the branches for her to pick herself." "Really?" "Of course, apricot trees attract caterpillars, and I wouldn't want someone I like to get bitten just to eat an apricot." Hearing this made me suddenly remember our trip to the apricot grove after he lost his memory. At that time, I had hoped he would also pull down the branches for me, so I could just tiptoe and reach the apricots. But in the end, I hardly moved. From start to finish, it was Shin Junran who pulled down the branches and picked the apricots, then cleaned them before giving them to me. My cheeks flushed a little as I asked, "So, do you like me?" "Yes." Shin Junran lifted his robe and sat down, looking at me with a half smile. "Wasn't I infatuated with you at first glance?" I fell silent again, trying to play coy. "Don't use my lies to mock me." "I'm not mocking you, I really like you," Shin Junran said with some emotion, but I misunderstood back then. "I thought you married me just to escape your mother's control. I wanted to get along well with you, but I didn't know how. I asked my friend, and he said that to like someone means to give them the best of everything, to let them feel your sincerity. But I thought I had already given you the best things in the house, yet you still weren't happy." I was dumbfounded. Indeed, whenever there was something good in the house, Shin Junran would give it to me. But I had never thought much about it. I was too focused on my grievances, constantly questioning why he wasn't more passionate towards me. Shin Junran continued, "Later, when I saw the divorce letter you wrote, I was even more at a loss about what to do. I went to ask a friend. The friend said, 'First, try to be polite, if that doesn't work, then try being forceful.' I thought that made sense, and just as I was about to try it out, I encountered an assassin and lost my memory." I was speechless. "The friend you mentioned, has he already settled down?" "Not yet. However, that friend with the Zhao surname has read many romantic stories and has quite a bit of knowledge about this." I chuckled dryly, choosing not to comment. What a pair, one who dares to speak and one who dares to listen. With that said, I no longer held any grudges in my heart. So I made one last request to Shin Junran. "From now on, let's not keep things to ourselves. If anything comes up, we should share it with each other, okay?" Shin Junran nodded, "I'll do as you say." In the evening, the weather cleared up, and we went to a restaurant on Y Street for dinner. When we reached Y Street, he pointed to a tea house. "It was here that I fell in love with you at first sight." I felt so embarrassed I wished I could sink into the ground. "Please don't use that to tease me again, I beg you." Shin Junran's eyes curved into a smile as he explained, "It's true, I'm not laughing at you. That day, you and your parent entered the capital. When you passed by here, you lifted the curtain of the carriage and peeked at the bustling street scene. I was having tea in this tea house at that moment. When I turned my head, I saw you. You were wearing a peach-colored outfit, with a round face and big eyes, very lively and cute. And you saw me too, you even smiled at me. So strictly speaking, you didn't lie to me. Our first encounter was indeed beautiful. I was puzzled. On the day I entered the capital, I did wear a peach-colored dress. But I have no memory of it at all. Shin Junran sighed. Yes, it's a pity you forgot. It's okay, we still have a long future ahead. Shin Junran held my hand tightly. You once said that if love isn't fated, you would fight for it yourself. But I feel that my love for you is fate. Male leads perspective. I regained my memory on a very ordinary morning. Since losing my memory, I could never sleep well at night, often tormented by headaches. The night before, I managed to sleep but had a lot of chaotic dreams. I dreamed of Fu Linshan sitting outside a house, holding 2 lotus pods. She asked cutely, "What's your name, and where do you live? When the rain stops, I'll return your umbrella and thank you properly." In the dream, I was surprisingly ungracious and stiffly rejected her. "It's just a small favor, no need to thank me." Fu Linshan pouted a bit, looking not very happy. I wanted to pinch her cheek, but in the end, I just got up and left. I also dreamed that Fu Linshan came to the prison to see me, asking if I would die. I told her, maybe yes, maybe no. She became unhappy again, saying that if I were a character in a story, I would surely be able to escape. I sighed inwardly. That was just a story. In reality, very few people could get out of the Ministry of Justice's prison. She said she had given the jailer money to not make things difficult for me. I thought her father wasn't a high-ranking official and her stepmother always made things hard for her, so she probably didn't have much money on her. If she spent all her money for my sake, what would she do when she needed money later? So I told her, no need to go to such lengths for me. I didn't mean to upset her, but it seemed I still managed to make her cry. She pouted, saying she didn't want me to worry about her. In short, our conversation in the prison was somewhat unpleasant. Before she left, I thought it wasn't easy for her to come here, and she must have to deal with many social relationships. Moreover, it wasn't a good place, dark, damp, with rats and cockroaches. It wasn't worth it for a young girl like her to come here. More importantly, what if someone with ill intentions saw her and implicated her? So I reminded her, don't come here again. That girl had quite a temper. She said okay, but when she walked out, she deliberately stomped her feet hard. There were many other dreams. After waking up, I regained my memory. Fu Linshan was still asleep, the blanket covering her chin, only her rosy face peeking out. Like a little bun, so cute. For various reasons, Fu Linshan was very afraid of me regaining my memory. So even if I remembered, I didn't plan to tell her. I wouldn't mind being an amnesiac Shin Junran forever, as long as she wouldn't be so anxious. I didn't want her to fear losing me because she would never lose me. Whether it was me or the overflowing happiness I felt now. Unfortunately, she still found out. I bore half the responsibility for this major mistake. Zhao Hongyi bore the other half. Who told him to casually bring up the princess's engagement? The princess's engagement has nothing to do with me. You see, Fu Linshan overheard it. This petty-minded girl, who has always relied on lies to maintain our relationship, must be both shocked and scared. But it really wasn't necessary. I didn't like Princess Qiao. Speaking of this, I was truly frustrated. Who was spreading rumors? I asked myself if I had ever crossed any boundaries with her. Even though we grew up together, it was only friendship. However, that little friendship didn't last long, it shattered after I was imprisoned. I had no grounds to blame her. After all, at that time, I couldn't say for sure what would happen. It was only natural for her to choose to protect herself. But since she made that choice, there was no room for negotiation. Before I married Linshan, she had come to see me in prison. She asked, if it had been me visiting you back then, would it also be me marrying you now? I just smiled and said nothing. I didn't really like her, but I thought it was nice of her as a friend to come visit me in prison. I tried to explain to Fu Linshan. However, she kept bringing up the incident with the apricots, and it gave me a headache. The trivial matters from the past weren't anything special. How could I possibly remember? Even if a little dog by the roadside wanted to eat an apricot, I would lower a branch so its sharp little teeth could reach the fruit. Does that mean I'm deeply in love with the little dog by the roadside? I fed the apricot to Linshan, but she didn't remember. Instead, she vividly recalled how I casually helped others reach the branch. Good heavens, as a dignified prime minister, I have grievances but no place to voice them. What I like is Linshan. That has never changed. At the start of my memory loss, she tricked me into believing I was infatuated with her at first sight. Hey, guess what? She actually stumbled upon the truth. It really was like that. That day, I was drinking tea on the second floor of a tea house. I heard the gulu-gulu sound of a carriage outside. Turning my head, I caught sight of Linshan peeking out from the carriage. Her eyes were bright, curiously watching the lively street scene. She was lively and charming, making one feel delighted at the sight. Seeing no one downstairs, I moved my fingers and tossed a teacup out the second floor window. The teacup shattered on impact, and Linshan looked up towards the sound. She saw me and tilted her head with a smile. That smile wasn't even polite, it was just a friendly gesture towards a stranger. It didn't matter, she saw me anyway. I felt great, apologized to the shopkeeper, and even offered compensation. The shopkeeper waved his hand. "Ah, it's just a worthless thing, you're being too formal." In the summer of our third year of marriage, Linshan became pregnant. She started craving sour foods. I searched through books, trying to find her all kinds of sour snacks. One day, I brought home a bag of sour jujubes. As I pushed open the door, I saw her peeling lotus seeds. These were also a token of our love. I set down the sour jujubes and asked, "Where did the lotus pods come from?" "I had them made by them." Linshan chewed and then said, "I heard someone say that lotus seeds symbolize completeness and many children bring great blessings." I thought I'd eat some, hoping our family will always be harmonious and healthy in the future. My heart softened, and I kissed her. Of course, we will be.